Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. It's Tuesday. It means we get a chance to talk to the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, Andrew Malcolm at AH Malcolm on the Twitterses. And of course, he's at RedState.com where he does a lot of VIP work over there, a lot of VIP columns. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a couple of other media stories today. Andrew, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. I always have to chuckle with that introduction. That's the best one. You know, if I think I'm going to tape that and play it at dinner, so everybody could say, oh, okay, all right, shut up and eat. Yeah,
yeah. So you've worked on campaigns before. You worked on the Bush campaign, right? I mean, the George W. Bush campaign.
The first one.
The first one, right? And you're a pretty smart guy. You've worked, you know the ins and outs of media strategy.
A little bit.
Okay. So the reason why I bring this up, Andrew, this is just kind of came out this morning, right? Apparently, The View wants to interview Ron DeSantis. I got to tell you, this is. I've got a post going up a little later on today about this, but we're going to talk about your column too, by the way. We're still going to talk about your column, but I thought when this story broke, I said, man, I got to talk to Andrew about this. Let me read to you the pitch that they sent to the governor's office, by the way, not to the campaign, which is another issue. It will only be a few weeks before the midterm elections, supervising talent producer Todd Polks wrote on Friday, and The View is an ideal place to remind millions of people what's at stake in the election. I'm not sure it's an ideal place. He goes on to say it's the most important and influential TV show for women, and that the show would be able to reach millions of female voters across the country on television and social media. Now, Andrew, just right off the bat, I can think of a couple problems with this pitch. But I'm wondering if you see the same problems I see. So I'm going to let you talk about what the problems with this pitch might be.
Well, you know, some the governor I worked for in Montana, he loved to walk into the lion's den. He really did. He loved to go in, and he said he got such a kick out of talking to a hostile audience and seeing the faces of some people turn and to see his argument working. Of course, he was a prosecutor for many years, so he was often talking to juries, and that's just like a very large jury.
Sure.
So some of them would like that challenge, but I don't see the value in it for DeSantis. Honestly, it would raise the confrontation. Would be good, but he would not get a fair shake. He would not get to explain himself, and it would be hostile.
Well, it would be very hostile. I'm going to get to just how hostile it would be in just a moment. But first off, the midterm elections, DeSantis is running for which office?
Yeah, right, exactly.
He's running for governor of Florida. Millions of women across the country aren't going to be voting for Ron DeSantis. And I have a sneaking suspicion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the ones who will be voting in Florida probably don't rely too much on The View to form their political views. And if they do, they're not going to be voting for Ron DeSantis anyway.
Anyway,
right.
Yeah, right.
And I'm really not sure that you can say that The View is the most important and influential TV show for women, because if that's the case, man, women are being ill-served by the national media.
Oh my God.
So,
can you imagine following the lead of Whoopi Goldberg?
Yeah, that would, and Joy Behar. Let's not forget Joy Behar.
I always, when I wrote about her a long time ago, I always referred to the misnamed Joy Behar.
Yes. So first off, this is the governor's office, right? So the response was, in part, we don't coordinate appearances or events of a political nature because we're focused on, running the governor's office, yeah. Right? So they sent it to the wrong place, which, this is ABC News. The View is actually technically an ABC News show, and you'd think that they would understand the difference between campaign and office, especially when they're pitching it as a campaign appearance, right?
No, they're not.
So this was a response that Brian Griffin, who is the deputy press secretary in the office. Christine Pushaw is the campaign press secretary. Brian Griffin is the deputy press secretary of the gubernatorial office. This is the this is a response he sent apparently today, because he put it out on Twitter.
I can't wait.
You're going to enjoy this. I just sit back. You're going to enjoy this. And I'm going to read it. I'm just going to read it all the way through because it's that good. Thanks for the invite. I understand that you were sending this request on behalf of your team. But are the hosts of The View really interested in hearing from Governor DeSantis about all of the important work he's doing on behalf of Floridians to protect their health and livelihoods, to stand up for parents and children, and to defend freedom? Which of the below statements from the hosts of The View do you recommend our team consider when deciding if the interview will be a genuine pursuit of the truth or worth the time? Joy Behar, August 2021. You're just short of calling DeSantis a negligent homicidal sociopath because that's what he is. She added, what is he doing? He's risking the lives of children's parents, their grandparents, anyone they may come in contact with, so he can appeal to his white supremacist base so he can continue his career and get reelected. Sonny Hostin, June 2022. Death Santis. I think he's a fascist and a bigot. Anna Navarro, April 2022, on Governor DeSantis' policies. It's anti-black, anti-gay, it's anti-LGBTQ plus community, and for some reason the Republican base responds to it. It's anti-American. It's what happens in Venezuela. It's what happens in Nicaragua. Sonny Hostin, February 2022, on Governor DeSantis' policy. It started out with CRT. Let's remember that. And those are anti-history laws, anti-black history laws, really. If you start coming after black people, what comes next, right? Oh, of course, the LGBTQ plus community, and then women, and then other marginalized groups. And then Brian Griffin goes on to say, we will pass on this offer. And please note, we don't coordinate appearances or events of a political nature from the official office. Our role is to serve the people of Florida. Thank you, Brian Griffin, Deputy Press Secretary, Executive Office of the Governor. Now, normally I'd say, that's a little, that's a little mean-spirited for, of a response from a professional invite, but actually, no, it's not, Andrew.
No, it's not. I totally agree with you. This is classic. One of the first things that communications people tell politicians, which they probably already know anyway, but is when they ask you a question, you don't have to answer that question. So what you say is something like he did, and only he did it in a letter, which is, that's a really good question. And then you talk about what you want to talk about. There's no responsibility to address the stupid things that a hostile questioner has brought up. And that's what he did. And he makes his point about protecting families in Florida and working for the future of the children and so on. That's exactly right. So you take it, turn it into your podium, and run with it. And that's what he did. And good job.
Well, right. And this, the reason why I bring this up is, first off, because it's delicious. I mean, I'm sure that they spent all of 10 minutes going through some transcripts just to find those things. And there's probably tons of other stuff that they just didn't, it was on the cutting room floor. But I mean, that is truly a delicious.
That's lovely.
It's lovely. But it follows on the heels, and this is something I'm going to bring up in my post a little later on, is something that New York Magazine wrote last week. And I'm going to say, and the headline on this was, why Republicans stopped talking to the press. And this is, I don't understand why anybody's surprised by this, right? I mean, the reason why they stopped talking to the press is because the media outlets are not normally, most of them are not honest brokers in this. They're not interested in having a conversation. They're interested in playing gotcha games, and especially when it comes to Republican candidates.
Absolutely. You remember at the beginning of the Tea Party, when there was a CNN reporter in Chicago, I think, interviewing, and she started arguing with the guy she interviewed over Tea Party thing. This was at the very, very beginning. And they have, like most people, they have opinions, but they're no longer professionally able to harness those opinions and seek to get information. And so if a Republican or a conservative appears on an outlet like that, they have to, as Griffin did here, take control and turn it around to their own purposes. Now, liberal politicians do the same thing. It's just that the questions are hardly ever gotcha. They're softball lobs in so that he can hit a home run by saying, why is it so important that you help women and children in today's world? You know, I mean, they're gimmies. And then with the Republicans is, what do you have against women and children that your legislation is so slanted to hurt their interests? Or you want to take control of the school for political purposes? So
why do you want to control women's bodies?
That's right. That's right. Oh, yes, of course. That one. You know, one time many years ago, and I was following a politician to a rural radio station in upstate Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, and he was on the radio, and I was listening to him. And then the next two guests came in. Oh, this is a long, long time ago, and they were very pro-choice. And I said, and the guy I was following was finishing his thing, and I was a little bit bored. So they were talking to me about what they were going to talk about. And I said, well, I mean, I acted very sincere. I said, isn't it really, I agree with you about choice, but shouldn't it really be the male's choice? I mean, after all, he's the one that provided the sperm and created the baby, so he should be in charge of what the woman can do with it. And they went absolutely ballistic. And I got up and walked out, and then we were listening to them afterwards on the radio, and they were so angry on the radio. And of course, the host didn't know why they were so angry. So it's kind of like, remember those, remember Conrad Dobler? Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah. It was, NFL guy, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. He was a St. Louis Cardinal, and he was in the Miller Lite commercials, and he was sitting between two fans. And he said, I think Miller Lite tastes great. And then he turned to the other one and said, I think Miller Lite is less filling. And then he got the two of them arguing, and he was just in seventh heaven.
Right.
But they made their point about Miller Lite.
Well, yeah, I remember those commercials. I remember, I mean, I don't know if you were ever in the stadiums when people started actually doing that chant back and forth, and I was thinking, this is the dumbest thing ever.
Tastes great, less filling.
Yeah, as I was participating in it, I was thinking, this is the dumbest thing ever. And then the wave came shortly after that, and I said, no, this is the dumbest thing. The wave is the dumbest thing ever.
Dumb, yeah.
But yes, I mean, it's all about the scoring points. And that's exactly what the problem is here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so Tim Graham at the Media Research Center actually had a response to this. I think it was either on yesterday or it may have even been on Friday or Thursday of last week when New York Magazine put this up. He wrote it at the Daily Signal, which is, Heritage. And said, with all of the conservative media outlets out there, kind of like Salem and redstate.com and Hot Air, among others, although he didn't mention us. I know that Tim meant us, right? I know that he had us in mind with this.
That's right.
But but with all of the different choices that Republicans have, why bother with The View? Why? I mean, you can go on Fox, and that's broadcast. You can also do lots of stuff that's online, which can be viral. Which you have, Newsmax is another broadcast or narrowcast, if you will, cablecast channel. So that's available. Salem Now, I'm just going to mention because our profits kind of depend on this, guys. Salem Now is now a subscription service where you can actually watch Salem broadcasts, and you should, by the way. But I mean, those I'm only partly joking. I'm only slightly kidding. But what I'm saying is that he's right. There's all sorts of different ways that you can get the message out. Why rely on a hostile filter to do that when you can actually have a more honest conversation, talking with people who don't hate your guts, who aren't starting off by calling you a fascist, a bigot. What was the Joy Behar one? Because that was actually my favorite. The Joy Behar one was a negligent homicidal sociopath. It's a great place to start a conversation. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, if you want to get information out, which the smart ones do, like DeSantis, and you're absolutely right. It sometimes serves the purpose of your audience to show you walking into the lion's den and handling yourself well. It's risky, but handling hostile and actually, you're going to get a confrontation. You're ready for it. You get it, and you put them down. And people like in public office, people like fighters, not fisticuffs or anything, but they like stand-up guys and women who can take them on, which is what Kristi Noem did. Remember Christine, what's her name? The New Jersey governor?
Oh, Christine Todd Whitman.
Yeah.
Who's now part of the Forward Party, by the way. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I missed that.
Yeah, that massive the massive swell of ennui that greeted Andrew Yang's announcement of the new Forward Party, the merger between two other parties that you never heard of either. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Christine Todd.
No, that's fine, because that was an important point to make, Ed. So sometimes you want a confrontation if you're in the process, not while you're governing, but if you're in the process of a campaign which is designed to create two camps, us and them.
Yep.
And if you want your us people to see you battling the them people, a confrontation could be useful from a political point of view. Unpleasant, but political, but useful.
Right. And so, I mean, this is when you're looking at media strategies, right? And this is something that you know very well about. I mean, you're looking at people who are prepared for the environment that they're going into, right? So they're prepared for that hostile environment, and you have to take a look at what DeSantis and his team are doing here and saying, these guys actually seem like they're ready for 2022 and possibly 2024 as a media handler yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, they're ready. Well, it's a big stage, but at this point, you don't want anything. At this point in a re-election campaign, you don't want anything to suggest that you're looking at 2024. Absolutely.
Well, right.
Out of the question. That was a question that George W. Bush got in 1998 when he was running for re-election. And he always said, well, I'm not talking about that year, but if you're worried about it, that's something you're going to have to factor into your re-election decision. And Texans obviously were so happy to have him back as second term that they just ignored that.
Right.
But that's an honest way of doing it. To say, I'm not thinking about 2024.
Yeah.
That's probably what Mark Twain would call a stretcher.
A stretcher indeed. A stretcher indeed. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about today, and again, this just came up today. Normally we record this on Monday afternoons, but because of technical difficulties on my end, which is, my cable company deciding to take a nap for 2 hours.
I'm laughing now.
We're all laughing today, but we weren't laughing yesterday when we were trying to get this thing done. But the benefit of it is that we're seeing, a couple of momentous news items. You know, the thing with DeSantis is certainly, I think it's momentous, but it's also very amusing. The other thing, though, is Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan.
Yeah.
And this is a very interesting trip. You reported from the Pacific Rim for years, and so
Yeah.
you've got a pretty good idea of the nuances around this. I actually am sort of on the fence as to whether or not this was a good idea. I think it's a good idea to stand up for Taiwan's independence, even though we don't quite recognize it. But Thomas Friedman, who I rely on next to never, is getting a massive fire hose of leaks from the Biden White House talking about how this is a really stupid and bad idea, and that they don't really want to have their fingerprints on this. Apparently, according to Friedman, Biden talked Xi Jinping into not providing material support to Russia for their invasion. They're buying the oil and probably gas too, and they're probably shipping some stuff, but it's you know, it probably sotto voce, and they've kept the the volume of it down. But I think what they're worried about is that Nancy Pelosi showing up there is going to force Xi Jinping to do something dramatic, and that might be to throw a bunch of resources to Russia so that they can roll over the rest of Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, this is Nancy Pelosi doing what we just talked about a little bit ago, creating confrontation. I don't know if you remember, but she showed up in Syria when Americans were banned from going there years ago. She showed up in Syria to meet with Bashar al-Assad, with her scarf on, and the guy was a murderer then, and he's even worse now with chemical weapons and so on. But this is about Nancy Pelosi, and if she was a lot younger, you would say, oh, she's grooming her image for a future effort. But she's 81, and this is just who she is.
Yeah.
And she probably got word that there was a large supply of vodka in Taiwan.
Well, there's a large supply of vodka in Moscow too, or at least so I hear.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, first off, I understand the nuances around this, right? And I'm not sure what the point is of Pelosi doing this. And that to me is what the real crux of this is. If there's a really good strategic objective other than just to thumb the nose at Xi Jinping, which actually I don't mind doing under normal circumstances, then I don't understand the value of this, especially when we're trying to tilt China from getting too involved in the Russo-Ukraine war. I mean, this is, Friedman is a guy that whose judgment I rely on absolutely never. But he does make a good point, and this may not really be a good time while we're trying to fight a proxy war in Ukraine to start sticking thumbs in the eye of China. and start really having I wouldn't call it a true front war, but certainly a two front confrontation that we're not really prepared to handle.
Well, no one's ever accused Nancy Pelosi of thinking long term, and it serves the purposes of Taiwan to have a prominent American politician. You remember when Donald Trump got elected, the first foreign government to call him was Taiwan, the female president, to congratulate him. And he took the call. And there was a big hubbub in the U.S. media that, oh, he shouldn't have done it because this is recognizing and so on. Well, this is what Taiwan tries to do, is to get recognized by U.S. in many ways, which raises their profile. And I understand it. There's nothing wrong with that. This is self-preservation as far as they're concerned. And so if a prominent Paul says, I want to come and visit, even though it makes a stink for a larger U.S. effort in Eastern Europe, they're all for it. Nancy Pelosi is very short term, and she's all about Nancy Pelosi. I had a little bit to do with her during the 1990 or 2000 campaign.
Right.
And she was an unusual person to work with. So yeah, I don't think it's necessary, but I see where her goal is and Taiwan's goal, and the hell with the rest of it. And so Biden has to deal with that. Well, he probably doesn't have to, but
Well,
he'll be asked to.
he's going to end
Yeah,
up having to deal with it. One way or the other, he's going to have to deal with it.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Speaking of Joe Biden, we got a few minutes left. I just want to catch up to your column that you wrote over the weekend. Truth is, Joe Biden's lies have caught up with him. That's a VIP column from the Prince of Twitter and the region of Red State over at redstate.com. So,
Yeah,
I,
that one was very well received online anyway.
indeed, it was for
It
good
was
reason. I mean, it's that column practically writes itself, doesn't it?
well, it does. I mean, it's kind of a joke that he's a fabulist and makes stuff up. But when you sit down and catalog it and collect it and
Yeah.
accumulate it, aggregate all the examples, it's overwhelming. And what it does is it makes you question everything you comes out of his mouth, every single thing. He says he doesn't understand why Americans don't get his many successes, and that's a lie too.
Right.
And we talked about this last week, and you did a post, I think, on it. His worst polling now is the worst president at this modern president at this stage in an administration in standing. He's down in the 30s now. Well, there's a reason for that, and the reason is not that Jen Psaki or Karine, what's her name, can't make his case. He doesn't have a case. And anyway, any case that they make positive about him is overwhelmed by the fact that you can't believe anything he says. This is like a serial a husband, serial affairs. You're at some point after the first or the fifth affair, you say, you know what, you can't believe this guy. And I think Americans have reached that point. And it's a very dangerous point to be in. And it's dangerous abroad too, because the world looks at him and says, oh, this guy isn't all there. And he's not got the support at home. So why shouldn't we invade Ukraine? They didn't do that when Trump was president. Right. They did it when Obama was president. They took over Crimea. And then 4 years of unpredictable, loudmouth Trump, and Putin didn't try anything. Then 60 days after Trump leaves, Putin is assembling an invasion army on the borders of Ukraine. Well, I don't know what's in store. That the bad guys like Iran and North Korea are cooking up, but I guarantee you there's something they're working on. North Korea has started its ICBM tests again.
Yep.
Now that Trump's gone. So there are, just like there's ramifications for Nancy Pelosi to do just what she wants to do, there's ramifications for people getting rid of Donald Trump, because that's what they want to do, and they didn't really look at the alternative.
No, and I think that was a failure of, it's a failure of the Democratic presidential nomination process. You can also say it's a failure in the Republican presidential nomination process, that the two choices that we ended up with were the two least desired, the two least desired people. Incumbents, well, it's tough to push out an incumbent, as Democrats are going to find out in 2024. Especially one that doesn't want to go. But yeah, I mean, we've had a couple of election cycles now where we've just gotten probably the two worst choices, right? And I mean, every election to some extent is, I don't want to necessarily denigrate Trump, but you have to admit that there should have been better candidates, right? On both sides of that ticket. And there weren't. And 2016 is really the Republican choice. And 2020, he's the incumbent. They're going to run him. But Hillary Clinton was really the best choice for Democrats in 2016. That was
No,
really what they want. What they went
no.
with. Joe Biden
This is
was
yeah.
the only guy that could do this in 2020. That's really what they went with.
Or John McCain in 2008.
Well, yeah, John McCain in 2008. I would say Mitt Romney was a better choice, and he came closer to beating Obama than McCain did, in large part because the cycles were just very different. And he would have made a good enough president. But clearly,
I think so, yeah.
but clearly was not the best prepared candidate to run in that cycle. And I wrote a book about that.
Yeah.
And which nobody's learned
What's
from.
the title of that, Ed?
Well, it's right over the shoulder there. Going Red.
I see it right there.
Enjoyed by literally dozens of people, Andrew. Literally dozens of people enjoyed that book.
Well, and also, Romney didn't have the money. Obama had a lot of money.
He did, yeah.
He never stopped his campaign after 2008, and he basically ignored the DNC, which they paid for in 2010. But he had a lot of money, and so from June or late May, he was drawing a portrait through ads of Mitt Romney as a rich elitist who gave women cancer. And Romney had no money to argue back.
Right. Yep.
And I think he's a good man. And I think he would have done a better job than Obama's second term. Remember, Obama was arguing al-Qaeda is on the run. Yeah.
Yeah. Look what happened, and look what happened over the weekend.
Yeah,
they went running to Kabul just as soon as we left.
Well, the next guy they interview to run al-Qaeda, they say, "Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And he can say, "Dead."
Yeah, I don't regret him being dead at all. But the fact is that the reason why he's in Kabul is because we pulled out and let the Taliban take it back over again in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And
of course they promised that they wouldn't allow outside terrorists in and blah blah blah. And there is some rumbling, I guess, going on in some places that this may be made up. Remember 2 years ago, there was a report widely distributed that he had died of asthma.
Yes. Somebody reminded me of that today too. Ian Miles Chong reminded me of that today too, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that."
Yeah, right. So these guys have a way of being Energizer bunnies, unfortunately. But there's always another guy to replace them, and I'm sure they'll find somebody that we can chase down and vaporize. Hellfire missiles, which allegedly they fired. They knew his pattern. This is like the mafia. Don't have a pattern. Don't drive the same way every day. So apparently he went out on his patio or balcony every day to enjoy the sun of Afghanistan in the summer. And the drone was waiting, and two Hellfire missiles. Now, one Hellfire missile, but I guess they wanted to make sure. They fired two. Remember, Soleimani, when Trump took him out in 2020, that was two Hellfire missiles from a drone too. Those Hellfires are something else.
Yep.
They got TV. They target very, very precise. And it's a large blast. If you look at the scene after the Soleimani assassination, you couldn't tell that there were two cars there, and I suspect you couldn't tell there was a balcony on the al-Qaeda leader's house.
I suspect you're correct.
They're calling in the media. They're calling it a safe house, and I said, well,
not so safe.
Not so safe now. That's like the Washington Post is always running headlines about a secret plan. I'm saying, well, if it's in a Washington Post, I don't think you could call it a secret anymore.
Maybe a once secret plan, but yeah, it's
a plan formerly known as secret.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Andrew. Speaking of blasts, we need to get to the jokes of the week. and have a blast
got a
with
few.
that.
I got a few old ones. That you got to send me that link.
Yeah, Gutfield's leftovers or something like that. Yeah, somebody sent that over to us. Hopefully, send it back to us if you're watching or listening to this. Send it back over to us because that sounds promising.
I missed that. So anyway, a Conan replay says a big China news. After 30 years of one couple, one child, officials now encourage a second child. The gender doesn't really matter as long as it's a boy. Jimmy Fallon replay says a new study says men have happier marriages if their wives are thinner than they are, and really unhappy marriages if they say that. And finally, Conan, he had some good writers. Conan O'Brien, he says, Kim Kardashian has been diagnosed with psoriasis. However, her doctor assured her it won't interfere with her ability to do nothing. Isn't that a good one?
That's a good one. I like that one too.
Yeah.
All right. Andrew Malcolm is the prince of Twitter. You can find him at AH Malcolm on Twitter. If you're not following him already, I mean, come on, man. He's the prince. The prince of Twitter.
That's right. The Ed says it. It
That's
must
right.
be true.
It must be true. It's on the internet. It must be true. And he's also the regent of redstate.com. You can find him there as well. If you don't catch him on Twitter, go to redstate.com and catch up with whatever he's doing over there, whether it be his VIP column or his Malcolm on the Right podcasts over there. Be sure to check that out and enjoy that. Andrew Malcolm, thank you so much for being with us. We will talk to you again next week.
You bet. Thank you, Ed. Bye, everybody.
All right. We'll be back with more from the Ed Morrissey Show right after this. Thank you for watching and listening to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube to get alerted as soon as new episodes get published. You can support the Ed Morrissey Show and Hot Air's VIP reporting by becoming a VIP member, too. Visit hotairvip.com and use the promo code SAVEAmerica, all one word, for 40% off your membership. Choose VIP Gold and gain membership to access to all of the Town Hall sites. Thanks again for watching and listening.